I think we're about ready to start. So, reigniting the passion for IT. In this theatre session, I'll be speaking to you about how ABN AMRO, a Dutch bank, is reinvigorating the IT infrastructure, the IT landscape by adopting Azure as its platform. So I'm Michael Bentley. I'm an evangelist for Azure and Microsoft technologies with the bank. And I've been with the bank since 2006, basically as a developer and a software configuration manager. And for a number of years, between 2006 and 2016, I was working in a part of the bank called investment banking. And I became very disillusioned with how we were doing IT. And I'll come on to the reasons why shortly. And I felt that there needed to be a change within the organization. And in 2016, I took myself off to my first Microsoft Ignite conference. So I'm not sure, is anybody here for the first time? Okay. I was blown away at that conference because I had never appreciated how much vibe and energy you could actually generate. And attending the sessions and seeing the possibilities that there were with the services that Microsoft had to offer on the platform. That week I just became a blogger. I think I spent 5 days just writing blogs to make sure that people back home in the office could start to build up an appreciation for what Azure could offer them. And by the time I got back after 5 days, I'd morphed into an evangelist, and I was no longer a developer. Now, ABN AMRO is a Dutch bank based in Amsterdam. We basically provide banking and financial services to both retail and corporate clients in the Netherlands. Now, before the financial crisis in 2008, we were a much larger bank. We had, at that time, 60,000 employees. We had a global footprint, and we were very much into investment banking. The bank today is a very different bank. We have just less than 20,000 employees, and we have 5,000 of those working in IT, spread across about 500 agile teams. And in recent times, we've gone through a transformation. We've moved away from a project-based way of working into a agile way of working. And some of the reasons behind that are basically shown here. So, as a project-based organization, we had real problems with the delivery of software. Basically, our planning and delivery of software was characterized by test cycles with long lead times, whereby we were very inefficient, often repeating test cycles. We had a very poor appreciation at that time within software development for many principles like software configuration management, like source code management, and what the right application of source code management and things like branching strategies could actually do for you. So projects were long. We found that in the delivery cycle, often developers were faced with non-trivial merges late on in projects. We had a change organization that was established to resist change. So consequently, getting anything into a production environment took months. And you could see that in our release planning, because one would think that the way that we did release planning, NASA or the European Space Agency had actually set up the release process. And then we had a dev and an ops organization, what we called a run organization and business as usual, that existed in different worlds. And in fact, they were separated by galaxies, so communication was a real problem. So when I came back from Ignite, I was all enthusiastic about the possibilities of what public cloud could do for us. But unbeknown to me at that time, there were also some colleagues working within our IT services part of the bank who were doing the same thing. They were actually taking steps to introduce Azure into the organization. So we found each other, and from that point on, we've been working very closely together. So I just want to give a quick introduction to some of the players within our organization so that we can set the context for as we move forward. So there are basically three main teams, two teams. The first one, the CBSP team, is the cloud-based services platform team. And in essence, what they've done for us is that they've created the provisioning of our infrastructure. Something that's very important to note is that as we started our Azure journey, we created a separate organization within our organization to deal with public cloud, because we didn't want our cloud strategy to be tainted by the way that we did business and we did IT today. So we set up the cloud-based services platform team purely to focus on Azure. And this team is staffed by ABN AMRO infrastructure specialists, security specialists, identity access management specialists, network specialists. And they operate in a silo separate to the current IT organization responsible for our, let's say, on-premise infrastructure. And they partnered with Microsoft experts who are advising and helping us provision the platform. More on that in a moment. I work within the Centers of Expertise for Software Development, and my role as an evangelist is to ensure that teams transitioning from agile to DevOps adopt the best practices for cloud, understand what CI/CD is. So my role there is to orient them and to encourage them to move to cloud in the right way. And then we have another team which is responsible for pipelines, basically Azure DevOps pipelines. I've transitioned my ownership to them so that they can support pipelines. So as we get more teams onto Azure, the support of those pipelines is more important. Okay, so those are the teams. There are other teams involved, but these are pretty important ones in this story. Okay, this is about our journey, where we started and where we are today. Now, we started in 2016 with a proof of value with Azure. So we basically wanted to answer a few questions regarding Azure. So first of all, would Azure allow us to innovate faster? Something that's very important to us because we want to distinguish ABN AMRO from other banks by being as innovative as possible. Secondly, we wanted to know how we wanted to know if using Azure would help us to attract and retain the right talent, something that's been very difficult for a bank, for an IT organization such as ABN AMRO, because we want to be able to innovate, we want to have the right people, and they're not really interested in being part of an organization which is dealing with infrastructure on premises and is not in a position to innovate. So we established the proof of value, and in that proof of value, there were a number of workloads that we used. But one of those workloads was a debt collection application. And for the debt collection application, which was an advanced data analytics one, we used a number of Azure services. First of all, we instantiated HD Insights. We used streaming analytics, data factory, and blob storage. And we also established at that time connectivity to on-premises using an express route. Now, the proof of concept, the proof of value, took around 3 months. And after 3 months, there was a successful conclusion. Sometime afterwards, the green light was given to allow us to continue to innovate on the Azure platform. Now, enabled to do that, CBSP set about creating compliant products. Now, they needed a period of time, first of all, to establish a governance process and some foundational controls, which were sort of prerequisites to moving to the cloud. They also engaged with key stakeholders within the bank, as well as our regulators, to ascertain the appetite for the adoption of public cloud. And basically, we got the thumbs up. So we continued on our journey by, first of all, creating some foundational controls, some products which we would use throughout all of our products that we would provision. So first of all, looking at how we did, basically all products would require some form of networking, identity access management, some security. So these foundation products were built into all the Azure compliant services that we would be using. Now, as a bank, in order to ensure that we would get approval for what we were doing, we needed to basically deploy within dedicated virtual networks. So we're not really using public-facing services. So all the services that we use, and there are many, all support virtual networks. That's important because that lowered the entry point for approval was lowered. Okay. So CBSP set about creating a catalogue of products. Now, what we saw was that as that catalogue of products grew, the adoption of teams moving to Azure was improved. So basically, teams going from agile to DevOps increased as the number of products that were being delivered was matured. The number of workloads going to production. So we saw that in the beginning of Q3, beginning of 2018, we basically had around 15 products that were already approved and standardized and compliant. Compliant basically with our security control framework. As we move forward to the present day, we now have around 50 workloads that we have in production, supported by 28 DevOps teams. The model now that's been adopted by CBSP is to take those same products and provide them as a self-service product. And by self-service, I mean that teams can actually provision their own infrastructure based on compliant products that have already been risk assessed. So what we see for next year is a potential doubling of the number of products that will be available. And by doubling the number of products that we have available, we'll be able to facilitate and support more teams and more workloads in production. Okay, just a little bit about what we call this shared service model. So when we started off in 2016, in order to accelerate getting workloads into production onto Azure, there was a cooperation between the CBSP team, the cloud-based services platform team, and actually the DevOps teams themselves. So they co-created product. And when you co-create product, basically targeting infrastructure, the responsibility for the support of that product is split between CBSP and the DevOps teams themselves. Now, what we want to encourage is the adoption of platform services and ultimately software as a service. So as you adopt platform services, the responsibility, the underlying responsibility for what you're doing moves down the chain. So basically, if we're using Microsoft PaaS services, which is what we're doing, then Microsoft are responsible for the product, CBSP are responsible for what the value add that they're putting on top, and the DevOps teams themselves are only responsible for their workload, for their application. So what we're seeing now in 2018 is a little bit of a transition where teams are adopting PaaS, and that's basically because we're making PaaS more available to them. And at the far right-hand side, where we've got SaaS, we're in the process of rolling out Office 365 and Dynamics 365, which means then that applications like the Power Apps platform, which will sit atop the Office and Dynamics, basically means that the responsibility is completely with Microsoft and only a little bit with our CBSP team. So ultimately, we want to be as far to the right as possible. Now, in order to help teams who are predominantly been working on premises for the last 10, 20 years, they need to orient themselves towards the cloud way of working. So what we've been able to do, a combination of the COE with the CBSP, so the Center of Expertise for Software Development, together with the Cloud-Based Services platform team, is create sort of value packs. And those value packs are collections of what we call certified, approved or compliant Azure services. So these are services that have already been risk assessed, and they've been put into the product catalog of the CBSP. What we then do is we highlight the technologies that we are using on premises, so that teams that, for example, a .NET developer or an ASP.NET developer is oriented to a value pack like web and API, because the technology that they're using on premise fits best into that value pack. And then they can see that the associated PaaS service, like app service, is probably where they need to go. So then they engage with CBSP and with the COE to understand more about those PaaS services. So we have various value packs. This is just a small sample of what we have, but we have many. The related products, we're building those out. So these are the ones we have available now. So if it's highlighted in blue, we have it now available in our catalog. Otherwise, it's coming in the either this year or next year. Okay. Now, the transition from Agile to DevOps is not straightforward. Teams need to be nurtured before they can actually reach full DevOps maturity. And that process takes a long time. We've been now working on Azure for about 18 months, and we really don't have one full DevOps mature team. They're in different phases of maturity. So we need an infrastructure in place which supports and assists and can assess the maturity of DevOps. So we have various streams established, all with the responsibility to help teams reach that maturity. So let's just take a couple to focus on for a moment, one of which is skills and the other is cloud native. So with skills, as you would expect, we're interested in the capability, the current state of a team in order to understand the platform that they're moving to, because basically they're responsible for their application, but they're also responsible for understanding the platform they're running on. So from next year, certification, Azure certification will be mandatory. One of the certifications in particular, developing for Microsoft Azure, will be a prerequisite. With cloud native, we're interested in a couple of things. For example, orienting teams towards PaaS. That's what we want to do. So teams that come along and say that they're interested in just hosting their application on Azure, on infrastructure, because they're not happy with the current on-premises way of working, is not a legitimate answer for moving to the cloud. So we really want to encourage the use of power. So one of the things that the cloud native stream does is assess the reasons why a team is moving to Azure. In addition, we want to focus on secure coding and the quality aspects of software development. So we do that through active coaching and mentoring of software development teams. And also through our standardization, standard pipelines that we've implemented within Azure DevOps pipelines, formerly VSTS, which is much easier to say than Azure DevOps pipelines. Okay. So this is basically the setup that we have for CI/CD using Azure DevOps pipelines. Splitting up CI and CD, we have sort of areas of responsibility. So the COE has always been responsible for the CI side of the build. And CBSP has been half responsible for the CD side by provisioning the required release steps as basically publishing them as extensions to Visual Studio Team Services. So just focusing on the CI side for a moment. We use a combination of hosted agents and private private agents, now called self-hosted. We do that because for CI builds, we need to connect to on-premises for code quality assessment. So we use tools like HP Fortify, SonarQube, and Nexus Lifecycle for assessing the security vulnerability and code quality of our, let's say, .NET builds, Java builds, Node.js, etc., Python. Unfortunately, so these tools for Nexus IQ and Fortify are on premises, so we need to use the express route. We need to use private agents. But for deployment, predominantly we use hosted agents, and sometimes we use self-hosted if we're deploying to a specific deployment group, which requires a VNet. We use collaboration tools. We will be using Microsoft Teams, and we have a desire to use VSTS, Azure DevOps, from end to end, including the use of boards. And that's really the ideal if you're working on Azure, because of the tight integration. Now, just a word on the CD side for a moment. So the CBSP team has created these compliance products that basically teams can then use for hosting their application. And up until now, the deployment of the infrastructure to VNets has been done by the CBSP team. That's basically not very scalable. So now those same products have been provisioned as self-service products by publishing the task groups as extensions into the VSTS marketplace. So they can be consumed by teams themselves. So the teams will create their own CD pipelines, selecting from the marketplace our own basically private extensions. So you can publish your own extensions to VSTS and just keep them private as opposed to public. So only your own organization can see them. We use on the DevOps side, say for monitoring and reporting, we use Splunk. So Splunk is integrated with ServiceNow. Just a smattering of some of the pipelines that we have. And if anybody's interested, I can talk to you in more detail about these pipelines and how we set them up. And then finally, some of the key learnings. So in the process that we've gone through over the last 2 months, over the last 2 years, correct me, basically 3 areas pop out, which is the mindset and behavior, the governance, and adding value. So with the mindset and behavior, I think it's really important that you have a change agent within your organization, an evangelist, and somebody who's not scared to mix it up a bit, in fact, maybe a lot within the organization, because that's what you need. When it comes to governance, you need to ensure that the governance process and the foundational controls that you're going to use are in place before you start putting workloads into the cloud. You need to make sure that you've got the necessary buy-in and acceptance from the organization. And then lastly, the model that we've adopted by creating shared services is imperative, because if you can create reusable products, you can speed up your adoption of cloud services, which allows you to innovate faster. That's it. Sorry. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'll be staying behind, and possibly, if my laptop works, I can give a demo of anything. Yeah, I think I have to get Microsoft have to provide that back to me, but yes, I think the slides will be made available.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, I'm running with no one, but thank you.
All right.
Hopefully we'll stay in touch.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we're connected now on LinkedIn, so that's great. All right. Okay.